Okay, what if everything you've ever been taught about the creation of the physical world is just completely backwards? Seriously, what if the universe around us, the Earth, the stars, biological life itself, wasn't some divine masterpiece carefully crafted by a perfect God, but was actually a cosmic mistake? What if it's a flawed architecture designed specifically to keep you trapped? Welcome to the ultimate paradigm inversion. Today, we are exploring a deeply suppressed, esoteric history that challenges our most ingrained traditional views of a perfect creation.
Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this fascinating subject today. We are going to completely unpack the core cosmological conflict found within the Nag Hammadi library, specifically looking at mind-bending texts like the Apocryphon of John and the hypostases of the Archons. We're going to dive into the ontological distinction between the true, perfect God and the ignorant creator of our material reality. It's a wild, philosophically profound journey, and the concepts we're exploring today are going to shed a ton of light on this perspective.
Here is a quick roadmap of our journey today. First, inverting the Genesis narrative. Then, the Ineffable Monad. Third, Yaldabaoth, the flawed creator. Fourth, the architecture of imprisonment. Next, splitting the divine androgen. And finally, escaping the material cosmos.
All right, let's jump right into part one, inverting the Genesis narrative.
So, you know the traditional Genesis paradigm, right? The universe is created in perfect divine harmony, humanity is placed in this idyllic Eden, and the catalyst for the fall is strictly internal. Basically, Adam and Eve freely choose to eat the forbidden fruit, so humanity bears the moral guilt. But the Gnostic tradition, it completely shatters that idea. In this view, the origin of our distortion isn't a human moral failure at all. It's an external, ignorant creation by a lesser being named Yaldabaoth. Instead of being cast out of a perfect paradise because we sinned, we are actually divine sparks, fundamentally entrapped in a flawed, heavy material render. Basically, we aren't the villains of the story, we are hostages.
Moving on to part two, the Ineffable Monad. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that this supreme being is definitively not the God of the Old Testament. In these Gnostic texts, the true God is known as the Ineffable Monad, or the thrice-powerful invisible spirit, and it resides in a realm of divine fullness called the Pleroma. This entity is pure light, pure thought, and pure spirit. It's so perfect and so unbounded that it is completely and utterly divorced from physical reality. It literally doesn't possess human emotions like jealousy or wrath.
Just look at this analysis of the Apocryphon of John. It notes that the highest deity is defined in terms of an abstract Greek concept of perfection, a perfection which excludes all anthropomorphism and all involvement in the world. This totally grounds the entire philosophy. True divine perfection could never involve itself in the messy, flawed, decaying architecture of matter. I mean, to create something that rots, dies, or suffers would literally contradict its very nature of perfection.
Which brings us to part three, Yaldabaoth, the flawed creator.
So if the Ineffable Monad didn't build this physical universe, we have to ask, who on earth did? Well, the texts lay out this chronological descent. It starts up in the divine realm with an emanation named Sophia, or wisdom. She desires to create something independently without the consent of her divine consort. And because this act stems from a singular unintegrated desire, it results in a deformity. A curtain of spirit is put up to separate the perfect realms from this new chaos, and from Sophia's mistake emerges Yaldabaoth. He's described as a monstrous lion-faced serpent, often called the Demiurge or the child of chaos. Finding himself all alone in the void, completely cut off from the Pleroma, he ignorantly mimics the perfect spiritual realms he can't actually see. He acts as this blind sculptor, building our physical, material world.
I just love the sheer boldness of this claim found in the Gospel of Philip. The world came about through a mistake. The Demiurge wanted to create a world that was imperishable and immortal, but he just failed completely. The entirety of physical creation, the laws of physics, the food chain, biological decay, was a cosmic accident. It's just a botched copy of a much higher spiritual reality.
And because Yaldabaoth is cut off by that spiritual curtain, he actually believes he is supreme. The hypostasis of the Archons records him declaring to his creation, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." Now, when the early Gnostics read the Old Testament, they didn't see this declaration as a statement of glorious monotheism. They saw it as a statement of supreme ignorance.
The Demiurge is proclaiming this out of utter blindness, completely unaware of the vast, perfect spiritual realms, the Pleroma and the Ineffable Monad, that exist infinitely above him.
Let's dig into part 4, the architecture of imprisonment. Obviously, Yaldabaoth couldn't manage this entire flawed cosmos on his own, so he appointed Archons. Think of them as cosmic middle managers. These authorities, with names like Samael and Sakla, which literally translates to fool, by the way, were entrusted with organizing the physical world. But their real job, to administer punishment, bind humanity in worldly cares, and basically keep us enslaved. You see, a drop of divine light, the pneuma, or spiritual spark, had trickled down into humanity. So the Archons constructed the heavy, restrictive render of biological matter, our physical bodies, specifically to imprison that divine spark and stop us from realizing our true heavenly origins.
This restrictive biology brings us right to part 5, splitting the divine androgyne. This is where the story gets incredibly wild. In the Gnostic texts, the original human entity, Adam, was created as a spiritual androgynous being. We're talking a perfect unity of male and female spiritual principles, containing the hidden epinoia of light. But the Archons saw this powerful, unified being and absolutely panicked. To weaken humanity, the chief Archon extracted the female form. So instead of Eve being this beautiful, divine companion made just to cure loneliness, her separation from Adam was an intentional, hostile tactic by the Archons to break humanity's spiritual unity and bind us to the distracting cycle of biological reproduction.
The Gospel of Philip makes this tragic consequence so clear. If the woman had not separated from the man, she should not die with the man. His separation became the beginning of death. It powerfully reinforces the idea that being split into biological reproductive halves was the literal origin point of human mortality. The division wasn't a blessing at all. It was the ultimate entrapment mechanism used by the Demiurge.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 6, Escaping the Material Cosmos. If we're trapped in this flawed prison by an ignorant creator, how do we actually get out? Well, this is where the hope lies. The Gospel of Philip promises that truth, which existed since the beginning, is sown everywhere. The Archon's work will ultimately fail. The Ineffable Monad sends a savior, often identified in these texts as a spiritual Christ entity, who descends through the cosmic realms, totally bypassing the Archons, just to remind humanity of its heavenly origin. So salvation isn't about moral acquittal or blind obedience to Old Testament laws, because those were written by the Demiurge. Salvation is about achieving gnosis, profound experiential spiritual knowledge. It's an intellectual and spiritual awakening that lets that divine spark see right through the illusion of the material world and finally ascend back to the pleroma.
I want to highlight this incredibly profound thought from modern commentary on Gnosticism. It is in ourselves, and in ourselves alone, that we must attack and destroy Yaldabaoth. Dismantling the flawed architecture of the Demiurge isn't about fighting some external war out there in the physical world. It is an internal revolution. It means actively rejecting the jealousy, the violence, the greed, and all the arbitrary rules of the material world that the Demiurge relies on to keep us distracted and divided. Which brings us to the ultimate question for you today. Sure, these texts might seem like exotic ancient mythology, but their philosophical core is shockingly relevant right now. If the material world and its societal rules are an archontic illusion designed to keep you spiritually asleep, I'll leave you to ponder this as we wrap up. What arbitrary boundaries, what flawed architectures are you accepting as reality today? What illusions do you need to shatter to discover your own inner divine spark? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and always keep seeking knowledge.